Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Mia Hemstad and I make videos about mental health, mindful living, and motherhood. And I'm so glad that you're here. Today was actually a requested video. Somebody who follows me on Instagram and who's been a longtime subscriber, thank you so much, you know who you are, DM'd me and asked me about PTSD. PTSD is one of my diagnoses, I'm pretty sure. And I'm diagnosed with PTSD and depression officially, and I love to share about it. I haven't talked too much about PTSD, but I guess that's why I'm being asked to, because I haven't really covered it on this channel. And I think that it's important. And so I'm really excited to talk about it with all of you. I've tried not to script this video or make notes like I usually do, because I really want this to be an authentic and real conversation, video about what my experience is with PTSD. So if you like this video and you find it helpful, please leave me a comment below of something that you found super helpful in it. I would love the feedback, and please consider subscribing to my channel. It really helps to support my content, and share this video if it really moved you and helped you. All right, so PTSD. I've always kind of known I've had anxiety. I've really battled with it since I was pretty young, but I would say it started to ramp up in high school. So I didn't really think I had PTSD, mainly because it is a diagnosis that's very commonly associated with veterans and people who've been to war. So it never even crossed my mind. As far as I was concerned, I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety, and I had been going to therapy on and off since 2014, and that's kind of what I was working on. However, I had an experience last October. I'm filming this video May 1st. And I had an experience last October where I was called to testify in court against the person who abused me. I went through a childhood of abuse and neglect. And obviously that contributed a lot to my mental illness problems. But as I've learned from research and talking with my doctors, that mental illness can be caused by genetic factors, circumstantial factors, environmental factors. There's a whole bunch of factors, and there's so much we don't know about the human brain yet, but that's what we know so far. Obviously, high level overview from me, not a doctor. And I do feel like it's important for me to just say right now that everything I share here is from my personal experience, and that I highly encourage you to listen to your heart and your mind and your body and what it's telling you. And if you're watching this and you need help, please, please, please take action after this video. Everything I put out here is to help you on your mental health journey, whatever that looks like for you. So I really hope that you get help with whatever it is that you're struggling with. If there's anything I can share with you from my experience, is that PTSD and depression are not a joke. They are not something to be messed around with. They're not something to be ignored. I like to say that mental illness does not have to be a death sentence, but oftentimes it is. And it is one that a lot of people don't pay attention to. So that's kind of what happened. Last October, my mental health I was doing great. Honestly, I was seeing a therapist, but I was coming to an end of therapy for postpartum depression and anxiety. I was doing great. I had found my identity and value in motherhood. I had rid myself of all this mom guilt and resentment in motherhood. I was really thriving. And so my time with that therapist was coming to a close. But then I get called into court, and obviously I don't have to go, but I wanted to go. I wanted the truth to come out. I wanted to stand up for myself and say, look, you abused me. That's the truth, and you're not going to get away with it. But what happened is something I'd never experienced before, which is, even when I wasn't thinking about what made me anxious, even when I wasn't thinking about a negative memory, even when I wasn't reflecting on it or talking to anyone about it, my whole body felt like just so anxious. Like I just had, if fear was a physical object, it was like I had a weighted blanket around me, and it didn't feel good. It didn't feel like a hug. It felt like I was being suffocated. I felt like all along my spine, I had something that was just holding me down and making me scared. And I didn't want to drive. I didn't want to leave the house. I would make myself, because I have kids and I want to get them outside, but it was so hard. It was such a fight and a battle every single moment of every single day, and I couldn't shake it, and I couldn't understand why it was happening, because I didn't have any specific memories that were coming to mind. I was like, why am I feeling this way? For a long time, I actually didn't even label it anxiety. I didn't know what was going on. And I had an experience where, I mean, obviously I knew, because I had been practicing mindfulness for several years now, I knew that the only thing that really changed in my life, you can hear my daughter out there. The only thing that really changed in my life was that I had agreed to go to court. I'm like, it has to be related to this, and it has to be something very deeply ingrained in my psyche, because in my brain, because I am being affected even without thinking about it. So just the fact that I know I'm going to testify is really bothering me. And so I knew it was that. Like, I had that self-awareness, but basically, yeah, it was like I was just so overwhelmed, exhausted. My nightmares came back in full force. They were terrifying and vivid and awful. And so I just started to unravel mentally and emotionally, because without sleep, obviously we start to unravel. So it basically felt every single day, like even though I had gone to bed and was in bed for 8 hours and was sleeping, my night terrors were so vivid and intense that I would wake up extremely mentally exhausted and fatigued, because my brain had been in overdrive the entire night of my sleep, feeling as if I was running away from someone who was trying to hurt me. And for those of us who have nightmares and night terrors and PTSD, my nightmares usually have a common theme, and that is that of powerlessness. Usually I'm running away from someone who's trying to hurt me or kill me, and I basically, the dream always ends with me not making it out. I don't die in the end of my dreams, but I am about to get caught, and it's terrifying and scary and exhausting. And no matter how hard I try to escape, it's like the dream keeps going, and I'm about to escape, but then I don't. And yeah, it was really hard. So I started to lose sleep, and then that's when like the hopelessness started to set in. That's when the tearfulness started to set in. That's when I just started crying my eyes out, and like without even prompting, like I just started to cry and feel hopeless. And what I hated so much about this experience, other than the fact that it was really overwhelming, another thing actually I should say is another symptom that I experienced in my PTSD was I would feel like I had pins and needles in my back, all along my back, but especially in between my low back and my shoulder blades, like just right in there where you can't really reach. Pins and needles in my neck, it's just everywhere. And the moment I'd wake up, I'd start to feel it. And the littlest things would set me off. And I'd be like, it would feel so overwhelming. It's like, why do I have these pins and needles in my back? And no matter what I do, no matter how I rub or stretch, these pins and needles, this feeling, it was like, it wasn't extremely painful, but it was just painful enough to be uncomfortable and noticeable and exhausting. And it was just a very unique pain. I'd never experienced it before. But I have experienced different levels of back pain, different kinds of back pain when I've dealt with anxiety. So I know that my anxiety manifests itself in the form of back pain, but this was a completely different type of back pain. Usually my back pain feels like a stabbing feeling in my neck, but this pain felt like pins and needles just all along my back. It was just like pins and needles, and I couldn't get it to stop, and it was awful. So I knew it was anxiety related. I knew it had to do with this trial and having to go to court. I would wake up and it would just be there, and I couldn't get it to go away. And it would start in the morning. Like I would just immediately have it in the morning, and the whole day was just characterized by this pain and me trying to fight it. And it was so hard. And no matter what I did or where I went, I couldn't get my head in the present moment. I couldn't be here. And one of the hardest things that really sucked about this experience that lasted for almost 2 months was that I would be crying in front of my kids. And my son, who's 3.5 now, he had just turned 3 at the time. He was really worried about me, and I really hated that I was going through that, and I had to it was just hard. And I'd be like, I'm okay, buddy, and hug my son. And I'm telling you this because if anyone's out there that is a mom and watching this, and you're working through your trauma while raising your kids, it is so hard, and you feel like a bad mom because you have all of this trauma. And I just want to remind you that you are an incredible mom. You're fighting for yourself. You're fighting for your life, literally. And you are choosing to work on your healing. And I think that that's a beautiful thing for your kids to witness. So, don't judge yourself or feel ashamed that you feel your feelings. And actually, that's one of the things that helped me, I think, during that time, amongst a bunch of other things I did, which I'll get into, to help me with PTSD. I felt my feelings. I allowed myself to cry and be angry and frustrated, not at other people, obviously. I didn't allow myself to work out my feelings on others, but I definitely made sure that I carved out space for myself every day to just feel my feelings and feel the anger I felt, because it's unfair that I have to go to, or that I have this situation where I even have to testify against someone. It's unfair that I was abused and neglected for so many years. It was unfair that I was mistreated. It was unfair that I now live with something that it just, that is so messed up. It's not my fault and it's not your fault. But if we want to live full lives, we have to take responsibility for our lives moving forward. I refuse to be a victim anymore. And that's the thing that can happen with PTSD is you can continue to be a victim of things that happened years ago. And I just refuse to waste any more years of my life continuing to feel like a victim when the person who hurt me is nowhere near me and I haven't seen them in so long. And I think that's what's so important. And that's the work that I've been doing, which is recognizing and healing in my body and my heart and my mind that I am no longer powerless. I am no longer unsafe. I am no longer being hurt. I am no longer being made to feel like I am not good enough. And I think I talked about this on an Instagram story the other day, but basically how because of trauma, we can tend to subconsciously relive that trauma in our adulthood. And some of the ways that I live out that trauma is continuing to treat myself like I'm not good enough, continuing to feel like I'm unsafe, continuing to feel like I am powerless, when the truth is I am no longer powerless. I have control over my life and what I do and how I think about myself and how I can love myself and treat myself like I am enough, because I am. And those things help to heal that. But I wanted to share really quickly just a quick definition of PTSD. I think it's really important not to self-diagnose. But just for your awareness, PTSD, as defined by the Mayo Clinic, is a disorder in which a person has difficulty recovering after experiencing or witnessing a terrifying event. The condition may last months or years, with triggers that can bring back memories of the trauma accompanied by intense emotional and physical reactions. Symptoms of PTSD are agitation, irritability, hostility, hypervigilance, self-destructive behavior or social isolation, flashbacks, fear, severe anxiety or mistrust, loss of interest or pleasure in activities, guilt or loneliness, insomnia or nightmares. Also common is emotional detachment or unwanted thoughts. There's a variety of treatments. I'm not going to go into all of it, but I will link this great resource down below for you to learn more about it. So long story short, I was starting to feel completely out of control. No amount of breath work or mindfulness or anything was helping me, although I did benefit hugely from this book called Take Control of Your Life by Mel Robbins. And even though it's like a personal development growth book about facing your fears, there's a lot of content in this book, which I will link below for you, about identifying when you're triggered. And I freaking loved that, because no one had ever taught me how to identify when I was triggered and what to do after I realized I was triggered. So instead of the trigger continuing to control you, you identify that you're triggered and then you choose your next response to the trigger. So what happens is I would recognize that I would feel these pins and needles in my back. And then I would ask myself, what happened that made that start happening? And then I would realize, well, my daughter's screaming at me. My daughter's 1.5. She's screaming at me in her high chair. Why would that trigger me? Well, because I don't like being screamed at, first of all, because I was screamed at a lot throughout my traumatic experience. And it also triggers me because I can't stop her from screaming at me. She's 1 year old. She doesn't understand when I ask her to stop screaming at me. So that makes me feel powerless. I can't control this person who's screaming at me. and I have to be around this person who's screaming at me because I'm her mother. So that's just one example. I could give so many, but I think I honestly could write a whole book or a chapter in a book about triggers. But I hope that it makes sense that I'd feel it in my body. I'd stop what I'm doing instead of going faster and faster and faster and doing more and more things or scrolling on my phone, because that helps me to kind of numb out that I'm feeling this and try to ignore it. My recommendation is, once you feel whatever it is that you're feeling, some people feel, and Mel Robbins breaks this down beautifully in her book, some people get, their throat gets tight, their chest gets tight, their ears get hot, maybe your back starts to hurt, maybe something starts to hurt, but everyone has kind of a physical telltale sign. And then you take a step back from what you're doing. You don't numb it. You don't numb that you're feeling that. You ask yourself, why am I feeling that? What just happened that caused me to feel that? And then once I identify that, I can take a step back and go, okay, Mia, I know that triggered you because you can't control your daughter. You can't control that she's screaming at you. But here's what we can remember. Her screams are the screams of a baby. That's the way that she communicates. She's a baby. She doesn't have words yet. That's the only way she can tell you she's hungry. She's not going to hurt you. She's not angry at you. She's not trying to make you feel like you're not a good enough mom or a good enough person. And then realizing from the powerlessness perspective, yes, I cannot control her, but it's okay. That even though she's upset, I'm going to be okay. Because it's just my baby and she's just communicating with me. Then, after I've identified the trigger and talked myself through what was triggering me, a sense of calm starts to take over. And it doesn't happen right away. So if you start to practice this in your own life, you might still feel the pins and needles. Just keep coaching yourself through and move slowly through your day and what you're doing. But I am not lying to you. I am seriously this is one of the things that's helped me so much. And basically, we can generically call it mindfulness, or you can call it choosing a response to fear or choosing a response to the trigger. Instead of numbing out that you're feeling triggered, recognizing it and choosing your next response. And my next response was understanding and self-compassion and awareness. And I started to do this every day that I would wake up and feel the pins and needles in my body, because every day that I'd wake up, my daughter would be screaming at me for breakfast. And so it would go again and again and again. So I started to practice every morning that process. I feel the trigger. I put the dishes down or the food down or whatever I'm doing. I acknowledge what's triggering me and I talk myself through it. And I can't pinpoint the exact day that it happened, but eventually those pins and needles went away. Literally, after experiencing them every day, all day, and they were debilitating and painful and uncomfortable, I probably experience these pins and needles maybe once a month now. And honestly, and as soon as I feel it, I know what to do and they go away. And that is how you know that there's a book called The Body Keeps a Score. And it's this amazing book written by this psychiatrist about how trauma is stored in the body. And I've learned this from so many books and so much research and all the TED Talks that I love to watch about how things that mess up in our minds, the traumatic experiences that we experience that mess up our minds, really, which is still capable of healing. The brain is a beautiful, amazing, adaptable thing. You're going to experience that trauma and that pain in your body. So if you're feeling a chronic pain, especially, it might be linked to your trauma. So for a long time, I just thought I had chronic back pain. I thought I got injured. I thought something must have happened when I was a kid, something, right? But then I learned and I realized when I went to a physical therapist for my back pain, which I really want to do a YouTube video with my physical therapist because he studies chronic pain and how it's actually related to mental illness a lot of the time. And we got to the bottom of it and he realized that my chronic back pain was actually linked to my anxiety. And he said, if you work on your anxiety, your back pain will go away. And I started to do that and it did. And this is a doctor of physical therapy. I know some people are like, that's not true. That sounds like some weird psychic BS. No, I went to a doctor after having an MRI, after spending hundreds of dollars on trying to figure out why I had all this back pain. And I learned that it was related to my mental illness. And more than ever did I realize that if I work on my mental illnesses, a lot of my physical ailments will start to improve. Because if you don't take care of what's up here, your body will start to make you pay attention to what's wrong in your brain by causing physical pain in different parts of your body. Does that make sense? The neighbors are moving, so we're going to hear some moving noises. But I know I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but let me know if this is helping you in the comments below. So that's one thing that really helped me. And if you want to learn more about how to practice that mindfulness with recognizing your trigger and responding, I highly recommend that you read Take Control of Your Life by Mel Robbins. It's extremely helpful. It helped me so much. Another thing that helped me was I stopped messing around with my mental health and I contacted a psychiatrist. I had went to a conference where the psychiatrist was speaking, and she shared about how a lot of people just leave their mental illnesses untreated, and then those mental illnesses start to like affect their body in so many other ways and make them even more sick than if they had just treated the mental illness. And I really loved that approach. I thought it was very preventative in her approach. She was like, look, not everyone should be on medication, but if you're really suffering from mental illness and it's making you sick physically and emotionally, if you don't take care of it, it's going to get worse. And so I went to see her. It was a 2-month waiting list to see her because she's that incredible. And thank God, so this is timeline. I saw her in December of 2019, and October and November of 2019, I was dealing with major PTSD, and I missed actually a really important part. So before I saw my psychiatrist in December, I called my primary care physician, and I asked her to please prescribe me some medication. I'm really struggling and I can't get in to see a psychiatrist until December. So she prescribed me some medication for my depression and some medication for my anxiety. Neither of them worked. Neither of them worked for me, and that's okay. And one thing that actually really helped me was this incredible podcast called 3 and 30, which I will also link down below. There's an episode where the podcaster and her sister talk about both having mental illness, and it was incredibly insightful to me because I look up to this woman who runs this podcast. She's incredible. And hearing that this woman that I look up to, she shared that she takes medication every single day for her mental health. I was like, I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow. Like, there are so many people out there that suffer from mental illness, and we don't even realize it because none of us talk about it. And I really want that to change. So I will link that as another resource for you down below. It's an amazing podcast, hearing mothers talk about dealing with mental health, illness, and depression, and all this stuff. Anyway, I'm getting so off track. Like, this might need to have been broken down into 3 episodes, but we're going to roll with it. So I hope I covered like the symptoms. Like, they're very physical. There's nightmares, there's chronic pain, there's overwhelm, there was like hyperventilating. There were days where I feel like I couldn't take a deep breath. Like, I was just like just shallow breath all the time, and that was really hard. And then there was the hopelessness and the tears. Anyway, so the medication wasn't working. Come November, I became suicidal. I was literally having intrusive thoughts, and when I say intrusive, unwanted. Like, I wasn't sitting here fantasizing about my death, but I was receiving intrusive thoughts about dying so many ways. Getting sick, getting in a car accident, driving over a cliff. I hope I'm not triggering anybody. I'm going to put a trigger warning at the beginning of this video. But I'm just going to be honest. And if any of you have experienced that, I just want you to know you're not alone. You're not crazy. You're not psycho. Like, this is a part of PTSD. Your body, as my therapist describes it, basically wants to cop out from life. I started to experience disassociation, which means that I detach from reality, where, you know that feeling when you space out and you can't really see and everything becomes blurry? I would experience that throughout the day, where my mind would just like detach and I wasn't present and I couldn't come back. And that's how I know it was getting really severe. My primary care physician, unfortunately, wasn't really taking what I was going through seriously. She was just prescribing the generic drug for overall. Anyway, I got super depressed in November. One day I was feeling particularly suicidal. I was crying my eyes out, and I called my husband and asked him to come home from work, and he was on his way home. And while he was on his way home, I called the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, which I will also put in the description box and leave right here. And it was so great to just have someone on the phone with me who I knew understood what I was talking about. And then my husband came home, and I just like laid on the couch like a numb potato, and he took care of me. And after the kids went to bed that night, I just cried and cried and cried and cried and cried and cried, and was angry that I was feeling this way. I was angry that I was going through this. I was angry that I couldn't control how I was feeling. I was just pissed and angry and crying and feeling unworthy and unlovable, and like I wanted to die, and it was horrible. And this was all happening in November. And even though I wasn't perfectly recovered, just crying all of that out with my husband and being honest about how angry I was super cathartic and helped me just feel the release that I needed. And thank God I have someone who can just like hold space for me and understand and not judge me and not try to fix me. And December came around and I went to my psychiatrist and I did a full clinical evaluation. And she shared with me that, yeah, my primary care physician should have just referred me to a specialist, and that a lot of times primary care physicians will just diagnose you quickly and they'll give you the general medication that works for most people. But that's not really helpful for most of us. If you really struggle with a mental illness, you should go to a specialist who specializes in mental health issues. So my psychiatrist did a full clinical workup and interview. It was like an hour-and-a-half appointment. And she diagnosed me formally with PTSD and major depressive disorder. Honestly, I was relieved. I was relieved to get a diagnosis. I was relieved to finally like know what I had, to know truly without a doubt, like, this is what I have. And what's amazing about a diagnosis is that it enables me to then start researching what these diagnoses entail, research what these illnesses cause, research how to live with these illnesses and thrive alongside these illnesses being a part of my life. And it's so actually liberating what a diagnosis does. So if any of you are watching this and you're scared to get a diagnosis, I honestly highly recommend it. I have a whole video giving 6 benefits of getting a medical diagnosis for your mental health, and I will link it up here in the cards. And I highly recommend that you watch it. Another thing that happened as a result of having a diagnosis formally was I was able to qualify for some therapy services at no cost to me. So there's this amazing program where I live, and I was able to get matched with a therapist who specializes in trauma therapy. And that's when I started cognitive behavioral therapy. There's also EMDR therapy, but I'm not ready for that right now. I tried it before. It didn't really work for me. And that was just amazing. I still see this therapist today, and she has been such a lifeline. I've grown so much going to therapy with her. Like I'm the strongest I've ever been. I love myself so much. I take such good care of myself, and I'm just so proud of myself for how hard I've worked. And but with all that being said, having a guide or a therapist is so helpful. But even a good therapist would tell you that the real work happens outside of that 1 hour a week you spend with your therapist. A therapist to me is someone who asks good questions, someone who gives good advice, someone who helps you and challenges you to discover the answers within yourself, because you know what you need deep down. And sometimes you get guided in the right direction if you really don't know. And a good therapist is someone who holds you accountable. So those are the things that I really get out of therapy. But truly, I just want to be real with you. So much work happens outside of therapy, like all the work. A lot of work happens outside of therapy. And so I don't like to sell therapy as like this, like, oh, you're going to go and you're going to be, someone else is going to heal you. No, you're going to do the work and you're going to heal yourself. And if you believe in God like I do, you also believe that he's healing you too, and he's there helping you, but you have to do the work. You have to show up for yourself and your healing. And it's a lot of work, but it is so worth it, because I am just thriving. Like, I hope you can see it and feel it and hear it in my voice that I am so lucky and I'm so grateful, and it's incredible how quickly things can change. I'm somebody that I hate waiting. I'm very impatient, and one thing that scares me about a healing journey or working through my trauma is the fact that I'm worried that it's going to take forever, and I don't have the patience for that. But what I have learned from the 6 years that I have been going in and out of therapy and all this work is you actually will make strides way faster than you think, and you'll start to feel better so much faster. Just the act of putting yourself first and showing up to therapy, even though it's hard, it's an act of validating your worth. You already start to feel better knowing I'm taking good care of myself. I am worth taking care of. And it already starts to just move mountains within you. So that's what I'd have to say about that. I know this video is getting really long, but I guess I wanted to say that I just wanted to wrap up the story, I guess, where it is right now. So I got diagnosed and I started on a pediatric level dose of medication. I do not share what I take because I don't want people to just go to their doctor and ask for that drug. Everybody is different. I once heard a gal say that she had to try 13 different drugs before she found a combination that worked for her. So you need to be patient. I was very fortunate that the first drug that I tried from the psychiatrist at a pediatric level dose, I started to see results in 2 weeks, which is very fast, very uncommon. But basically, on a pediatric level dose, my anxiety became more manageable. My depression, I won't say went away, but I got to a place where I just felt like I could live again. And like I didn't have all these unwanted suicidal thoughts. I just felt stable. I felt better. But it really isn't it's not like a solution. It's not a magic thing. And I want to be clear that I take medication every single day still. And I am so thankful that I have found a medication that works for me, that helps me. And I also want to be clear that this is the analogy I would describe, because there's this awful graphic, which I will put here, that everyone keeps sharing on social media, and it pisses me off. And here's why. It says something to the effect of, sure, you can be depressed and depression is real, but if you're not exercising and eating healthy and doing this or that, then you're not even giving yourself a fighting chance. The reason why that is BS is because anyone who has a real mental illness, knows that mental illness, like any other severe life-threatening illness, keeps you from doing things like exercising and eating healthy and taking a shower and brushing your teeth. Because you wouldn't go to someone who has cancer, and I know some people get upset with that comparison, but honestly, cancer is life-threatening, and so is mental illness, so is PTSD and depression. People take their lives all the time. So I'm going to use that as an analogy. If someone had cancer, you wouldn't go to them and be like, well, if you would just eat healthy and exercise, maybe you would have a better fighting chance at recovering from your cancer. And we know that eating right and exercising do help our mental wellness. That is absolutely true. But what people aren't factoring in is the toll that having a mental illness has on your ability to make decisions and on your energy level to carry out those decisions. When I was at my most depressed and anxious, I literally couldn't go through my day without crying. I literally could not function or make a decision about what to eat or if I needed to shower or pee. Like I literally couldn't. Your brain is so bogged down and in a fog that you cannot function. And I don't like when people tell me and other people that if you just exercise and eat healthy, that you'll have a better chance. Here's how I would describe having a real mental illness and taking medication. There's a game of life happening, right? Everyone's on the soccer field playing the game of life. And those of us who have severe mental illness are sitting on the bench. And we're not just sitting on the bench. Our hands and our feet are tied. And there's practically duct tape over our mouths. So we can't say we want to be in the game. We can't even stand up to ask to be in the game. We can't raise our hand to be in the game. We're just sitting on the benches, just hoping someone sees us. And we don't get to participate in the game of life. Taking medication every day took that duct tape off, released my hands and my feet, and enabled me to get back on the field of life. And that's the best way that I can describe it. Again, someone's coming by, but that's the best way I can describe it. Really, medication didn't solve all of my problems. It just enabled me to actually do the things that also promote mental wellness. Something that people don't understand is we use mental health and mental illness interchangeably, but they're actually different. And no, I'm not a doctor, but you can do the research yourself that health and well-being are different from being sick. Okay? You have to treat illness, but you can do things like, even if you don't have depression or anxiety, you can still do things that aid in having good mental health, right? You don't have to be obese to want to eat healthy, right? There's preventative measures of eating healthy so that you don't get obese. Does that make sense? I really hope that makes sense. But basically what I'm trying to say is exercising and eating right and all these things are great. But if you already have mental illness, if you're already sick, you should be seeking out treatment. And whether that's through dialectical behavioral therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, psychodynamic therapy, there's so many different modalities of therapy, or medication of some sort or combination, you should be seeking out serious treatment for your mental illness the same way that you would if you had diabetes or cancer or an autoimmune disease or any other illness. We're not talking just about having good mental health. Like if you want to have good mental health, go to sleep, drink water, eat healthy, meditate. Yes, those are things and habits and rituals and activities that help you have good mental health. But what if you're like me? What if you have an actual mental illness exercising and eating healthy are not going to make it go away and are not going to make it get better. And maybe you'll feel a temporary high. Maybe temporarily you'll feel okay, but then you're going to feel sick again and you're going to crash and burn. And that is why it's so important to get a professional and to see a specialist and to really work on your healing and your health, because no amount of yoga or meditation is gonna make your mental illness disappear. And I'm sure someone's going to comment and say, I was so depressed and suicidal and I started doing yoga and I started feeling better. That's great. And that's because everybody has a different cause to their mental illness. Some people, it's circumstantial. Some people, it's situational. Like if they have a really bad job and a really abusive boss and they leave that job and they move to a different city and they find themselves there, then they feel better. Great. But if you're like me and you have genetic factors because depression and anxiety run in your family, if you're like me and you were abused throughout your childhood, and so there's circumstantial stuff there and childhood trauma there, there's so many layers. And I just am encouraging you and asking you to please stop comparing yourself and your journey and your life to all these other people that you see on Instagram and all these other people that you read about online that tell you that you can heal yourself by eating kale. It is complete BS. Because what you need to do is to look inside of you. You know your story and your life and your situation better than anybody else, better than me, better than anyone, even better than your therapist. And that's why it's so important that you think about what you've been through. Don't go, well, this girl I follow on Instagram or this blogger that I follow online, she said that if you follow her 30-day plan, that you will no longer be depressed. She's selling you something and she's lying to you. Sure, that might have worked for her, but did she have the same childhood as you? Did she go through the same trauma as you? Does she have the same parents as you who were carrying genetic markers for depression and anxiety and addiction? No, you have you are the only version of you. You have a unique experience. And that unique experience means that your treatment plan has to be unique to you. And that is why I do not tell people the medication that I take, because it's not fast food. This is not a fast food restaurant. You cannot go to your psychiatrist and say, I want 2 of those, please. 10 milligrams of that, please. That's not how it works. So no, I'm getting really fired up, but I just feel like there's so much misunderstanding, especially by people who might have situational depression or a different type of mental illness, and they're telling everybody to just work out and eat kale. And I'm just like, oh, stop. Stop telling people that they just need to fix themselves. Allow people and encourage people to go get help. It's okay if you need to take medication. It's okay if you need to see a therapist every week for the rest of your life. It's okay if you need to go to the support group. It's okay if you need a doctor for your illness. It is what you should do if you're sick. And it's okay to admit that you're sick. And it is not your fault that you're sick. It wasn't your or my fault that we went through what we went through. But the freaking good news is that there is hope, that there is a solution for you. You have to be patient in discovering that solution. Not every doctor is going to vibe with you. Not every doctor is going to work properly for you, and you have to trust your gut and listen to that and instinct and go find a different one. And I promise you, there are good doctors out there. And I'm someone who is severely taken advantage of by my doctor that delivered my first child. He performed an episiotomy without my consent. He was completely verbally derogatory to me. He was horrendous, and I still believe in the good of doctors and the good of people. I know that there are good ones out there. So this video has carried on long enough. I'm going to leave it at that. If you have any more questions, please leave them in the comments. I will make sure to link all the resources in the description box. And I just want to say thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. I love you. If you're having a challenge right now, keep fighting. Do not quit. Keep talking about it. Call someone. DM someone. I'm here. My DMs are always open. And call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline if it comes to that. There's no shame in it. It is very helpful. It's a great resource, and it's one that you should use if you need it. All right. I love you guys so much. I will see you next week, and I hope this video helped you. Bye.